everybody, my name is Lindsay. Welcome back to my bookish and writing channel. Today we are taking a little trip down memory lane because I'm writing a middle grade book right now, which is making me think about all of the middle grade books that I read between the ages of 9 and 13 in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I thought today I would talk about my favorite middle grade books that I read growing up. In the comments below, I would also love to hear your favorite middle grade books growing up, and especially if we read the same ones, I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. So I have to start with the person who was my favorite author for years. Between the ages of 9 to 13, I could just not get enough of her books, and that was Sharon Creech. In elementary school, I read Ruby Holler, and I absolutely loved it, so I kept reading her books, and I read Chasing Redbird and absolutely loved it. Then in 6th grade, I believe, it was around 6th grade, I read Absolutely Normal Chaos. Absolutely loved it. This became my favorite book for a while, and I reread and reread it, and I don't reread very often, and I definitely didn't reread a lot as a kid. And Bloomability, and I absolutely loved it, of course. I remember Ruby Holler having a very strong sense of setting and family, and a lot of the scenes really tugged at my heartstrings. And then in middle school, Absolutely Normal Chaos was so much fun to read. It was a journal entry type story about a girl who was about my age, and she was reading the Odyssey, which was a very strange book, and she was talking about all of the tea happening in the Odyssey, but also all of the tea happening in her life this one summer, and it was just so much fun to read. Something about Sharon Creech's ability to create characters and tell stories, and her writing style just really clicked with me in a way that no author could at the time. So when I think of middle grade books, specifically the middle grade books that I grew up with, I think of her books first. Next, I must talk about the Unicorns of Balinor series by Mary Stanton. This is actually a series that my friends and I read together, which was so much fun. I have such fond memories of, I believe it was 5th grade, and I was just finishing up one of the volumes in the series, and I came over to her desk and I'm like, "Are you finished with the next volume?" Because we were so obsessed with this series. Because 2 of my friends were the ones that owned that series and introduced it to us, and so the rest of us were borrowing the books and reading them all at the same time. It was just such a fun time. One of the reasons why this series meant so much to all of us, aside from the fact that we just really loved the story and the characters and wanted to know what would happen next, is because every day at recess, without fail, from 1st through 5th grade, my friends and I would pretend to be unicorns at recess. So we would go to the grassy field and just gallop around. We would meet, we would explain our characters, and we would come up with a story, and then we would act it out. And yeah, idyllic childhood right there. So this is definitely another middle grade book that usually comes to mind when I think of middle grade books that I read as a kid. Another book that I loved growing up, I'm pretty sure this is a middle grade book, but the main character is 16, so it could be young adult. But regardless, I read this when I was 11 and I reread it and it was a favorite. I'm gonna end the suspense right there. It was All American Girl by Meg Cabot, and she wrote the Princess Diaries series as well. This book follows a teenager who is a sophomore in high school, and she saves the president by accident and becomes very famous for it. I remember really enjoying this story. I thought that the main character was so cool because she dyed her entire closet black, and then she liked to paint, and she was an artist, and she was going to art school, and I will always remember what the art teacher told her, which was to write what you know and paint what you see, and that piece of advice always stuck with me. I also really liked the writing style of this book. The main character was very sassy in this one too, and I really liked the sassy characters back then. It was just so much fun to read. And this character also liked to include a lot of lists in the book, which never felt gimmicky. They were always very fun and engaging to read. Another series that I was very much glued to at this age was the Amelia's Notebook series by Marissa Moss. This might have also been my first exposure to a graphic novel type series, and I have very fond memories of going to the school library and seeing if they had more in this series. I reread this series. I loved it. This was another sassy diary entry type series that I just could not get enough of. I also loved the illustrations, and it was just so much fun to read this. And I will, to this day, I remember her very mean but very unique and specific description of her sister's nose, and for some reason that just stuck with me. Not for some reason, it was just a very unique description, which, side note, but as a writer, it's a much better idea to describe something in the most unique way possible rather than saying somebody had like brown eyes and brown hair. Like, what does their face remind you of? For example, her sister's nose she described as a jelly roll nose, which is a very specific description, and I still remember it. So anyway, this series was one of my favorites. Loved it so much. Another series that I really enjoyed, I didn't read all of it because I unfortunately kind of aged out of middle grade reading and was more interested in reading young adult books as this series was going on. But anyway, I read about 4 books of the Shadow Children series by Margaret Peterson Haddix. This book and also The Giver by Lois Lowry were probably my first exposures to dystopian novels. They left a very lasting impact on me. I still remember how these ended and how I just wanted to know more about where the characters ended up. Another book that I read as a kid that really stood out to me was Because of Winn-Dixie by Kate DiCamillo. Obviously, I loved Winn-Dixie. I loved the animal adoption aspect of this story and the familial love as well, but I remember specifically that the main character goes through a few scenes where she judges a character too quickly, and then she gets to know them, and then she realizes that her judgment was completely wrong. And so this book specifically taught me to take a step back and to try not to judge others too quickly before you get to know them. Another one that really stood out to me as a kid was Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt, for so many reasons. First of all, I was so captivated with the story, just like the main character Winnie was. And as a writer, as somebody who really wanted to write, I was learning a lot about different literary techniques in this. I know we really went through metaphor when we were reading this in 6th grade together. And I was also not expecting Winnie's decision at the end. I thought she was going to make a completely different decision. And so her decision at the end really left me thinking. Yeah, just what a great book. I remember Holes by Louis Satcher being so popular, especially in 5th and 6th grade. And I don't remember exactly when I read it. I don't remember if I read it during that time or if I picked it up later, but that's also a very well-written story. I also remember watching the movie and enjoying the movie so much. And I still remember that I listened to that ending song. It was on a CD that I had, and I would listen to that song on repeat on my CD, on my portable Walkman, which I brought everywhere with me in the car and on the bus. And so I listened to that song all the time. So very fond memories there. I only read this next book once, but it was so inspiring for me as a writer, and that was The School Story by Andrew Clements. It was about a 12-year-old novelist who is trying to get her novel published for the first time, and I remember that that book in particular taught me the word manuscript. And then of course I started using that word all the time, saying I was working on my manuscript. Do you want to take a look at my manuscript? And I just felt so cool and professional. Lastly, The Moor Child by Eloise McGraw was another favorite that I read when I was 12 years old, and I read this as a class book recommendation with my friend for our class project for our book report. We ended up making a board game about the book, and I still have that board game somewhere in storage. So I want to wrap up this video by saying that most of the books on these lists were recommended to me by my teachers, and I am so thankful that I grew up with teachers that encouraged me to read and knew exactly what books that me and my classmates would enjoy reading. It was one of my elementary school teachers that recommended Sharon Creech to me. And then my 6th grade teacher had a huge list of book recommendations, and we would read one book as a class, but then we would have the freedom to pick which book we wanted to read from that list and do a report on it. And our reports were so creative. We could make film trailers based off of the books we read. We could make board games, which my friend and I did. And I just remember that being such a fun year and so pivotal in my reading life and my writing life. So those are all of my favorite books that I read and reread sometimes between the ages of 9 to 13. I would love to know what your favorite books were growing up. What books did you enjoy reading and rereading between the ages of 9 to 13 or close to that age range? What are your favorite middle grade books? I would love to know. Let's talk about them in the comments. But that is going to be it for me today. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed going on this very nostalgic road trip with me. And if you would like to leave an emoji in the comments just for fun or to let me know you're here, please leave me a bird emoji of your choice for Chasing Redbird by Sharon Creech, which was a favorite growing up, of course. If you liked this video, please hit the like button so that I know you enjoyed it, and I will see you all again soon with a new bookish or writing video. Bye everybody!